Hi, my name's Ian, and welcome to the VP Toolkit workflow series for Unreal Engine 4.27. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a basic nDisplay config and then use that nDisplay config in Switchboard to render onto a projector or an LED wall or just your screen. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to run Unreal Engine 4.27. I have it docked here, but you may have to run your shortcut. Once your project browser is opened here, we're going to make a film, television, and live events, and then in-camera VFX. Now I'm doing this because I want to start with a simple project that is already set up for this. Epic actually recommends that you use this as a base project. Also, once we get into the VP Toolkit Concept Kit plugin, some of the features in that are not available outside of this template project. But it's a good starting spot. So if you need to jump to other projects and something isn't rendering correctly, you can always come back to this project to make sure that your system is, you have the best chance of getting it to run in the template. I'm going to name it Setup 2 because I've already created a Setup 1. Okay, so once this is fired up, so there is a nDisplay config and everything that we're going to be setting up already in here, but I want to show you guys how to set this up. So I'm going to just select both of those and delete them. Now we have just a pretty much empty project to work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and just in my content to keep it simple, I'm going to create a level and then I'm going to name it stage level. And then I'm going to take that stage level and I'm going to add it to the already existing level that I have here. Now, if you don't have this levels window, you can go up to Windows and then Levels, and then I like to keep it over here with the World Outliner and my layers. It's kind of all my different categories that I have to work with. So once you have that there, you're going to want to change that to always loaded. Streaming method, always loaded. And so now what that is we have our stage level, which is where we're going to put our nDisplay config and all of our actors that we want to bring around from project to project or from level to environment. We now have that just loaded into this environment, so it's separate from it. And then I'm going to right click that and hit make current. Now everything that we bring into this level will go into that level instead of our persistent level. So next I'm going to right click and then go to nDisplay config. We're going to create a new config here. And I'm just going to leave that as nDisplay config for right now. You can name it whatever you like. And then I'm just going to drop that into my level. I just dragged it right in. And then I'm going to go over to its details panel and just zero that out so that it's at the base of our level. With this level, it's easy to just kind of tell what's going on when you have it at the 0. So once you've got that in there, now let's open that up. Now you're going to see over in components over here, we have a root, which is basically just the scene root. It's the base of this actor structure. And then we have the default view, which is going to be our default perspective into an nDisplay render. And then there's an nDisplay screen here. Since we're doing in-camera VFX, we actually can't use this nDisplay screen. This is kind of just a, you can determine the size of it, the screen size, you can enter it manually, and nDisplay will take that and make its own screen out of it. But we're actually going to delete that out because we're going to have to put our own mesh into here. So once you've deleted that out, we're going to go back out to the editor here. And so you're going to want to make sure that your show plugin content is enabled because we're going to go into plugin content. And then when you click this little folder here and type nDisplay, I typed it wrong. nDisplay, and then we're going to go to nDisplay content and meshes, And then we're going to steal this little 1x1 plane here. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to drag it into here, and I'm going to connect it to the root. Once you connect the mesh to the root, I'm actually going to rename mine projector and then the size of my projector screen. Now if you have an LED wall and you're doing this, you're just going to want to count the tiles. That would be this will work for a flat LED wall, but if you're using a curved LED wall, you'll have to get a custom mesh made. So you'll want to reach out to somebody that understands projection mapping and or 3D modeling and see if they can make something for you. I hope to do a video on this soon, but I don't know enough about it to be able to teach you guys. But if you have a curved screen and you're just following along, you can go through the same setups and go through the same setup process and get your configuration running, and then just switch out the mesh as soon as you get that mesh, because you can get some at least semi-usable stuff depending upon the curve of your wall. If you have like an entire volume, you're going to need a bunch of custom meshes, and you're going to want to split those up across multiple render nodes. So the reason we grab that 1x1 plane now is that we can go into the scale here and we can put the width and the height of our screen. And then you can see that it has sized it to what is behind me. Okay, so now that we have that mesh, which is going to be the virtual representation of our screen, you could have multiple of these, and I mean, pretty much this process is just going to be not copy and paste, but you can just duplicate this and create another flat screen or import multiple meshes, and then we'll just assign them to separate viewports. So next I'm going to add an in-camera VFX camera. Actually, no, let me not add that yet. So now that we put our mesh in here, let's assign a viewport to it. So we're going to go down to the cluster section and we're going to add a new cluster node. So a cluster node is an instance of nDisplay firing. It's the editor coming up in play mode. It's, you know what I mean? It's Unreal Engine running nDisplay. So if you have multiple nodes, that means you're going to have multiple instances of that firing up, which you may want, but usually you don't want on one machine. So if you're creating a system where you want this to fire on a couple different machines, you're going to want to assign a node for each one, and you're going to want to assign a viewport for each one or multiple viewports. So just to go through here, we're going to just leave this as node 0, and then make sure it's cluster. And then I know that my projector behind me is Ultra HD, so I'm going to choose that. Adjust cluster node position to prevent overlap. I've turned this off a couple times because it was auto adjusting for me. Add viewport to new cluster. If we enable that, that's just going to add a viewport when we create this. So the IP address, I'm going to use the IP address of my server, which is what is rendering this machine behind me. Now, later we'll see that when we open up Switchboard, we're going to be sending out a signal that needs to be picked up by a listener. So the only thing running on my server is a listener, a Switchboard listener. I'll show you how to set that up in once we get there. But so for right now, we're just going to put whatever machine that we want. If we wanted to make this extremely simple and fire it up on this machine, we would just put either local IP address or the IP address of this machine. If you need to find the IP address of your machine, just open up your command prompt and type in ip.config and hit enter, and it will tell you your IP address. So I'm not going to enable sound, and I'm not going to enable full screen, but full screen every once in a while can kind of help with if you have extra pixels that your LED wall processor, you thought was mapped correctly, but there's a little bit at the bottom or something like that. Every once in a while, full screen can kind of save your butt. But I'm going to leave it off for now because I'd rather myself not have a lot of things making adjustments that I'm not making. So if you click down Window, so this is our resolution. So when we click the preset up here, it really just entered this into here for us. And then the X and Y value is going to be where this lives on our screens on Windows space. So if I needed to, say, render it on this machine, but on a secondary screen, I would add the resolution of the screen that I'm currently on to push that over. So this is really just where does it start? So if I put that in here, it's going to start not at the 0 of our pixel space. It's going to start on the other side. And I can demonstrate that a little more in a minute. And then output remapping, don't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about these. You may be able to do fixed aspect ratio, but and then we're going to add this. And once that's added, you're going to see that there's a automatically there's a host, there's the node, and then there's the viewport. So all that information that we entered, we have control over here. It's the same thing. So if we needed to adjust it, we can change it. And then we have viewport 0. So viewport 0 is now where we're going to set up the projection for nDisplay. So I'm going to go here, and the origin view, I'm going to select the default viewpoint. So that's this over here. The default viewpoint is basically going to be our perspective until we add an in-camera VFX, and then that in-camera VFX will layer the frustum view on top of our screen. So you want to click down here and choose a projection policy. So you're going to want to choose mesh, which is the only one that works with in-camera VFX, and then we're going to choose our mesh that we brought in here. And you can see things got all crazy. So what I'm going to do is, this is our default view. So this is our view into this screen. You can see once I move it, you can see the perspective of that world changing. And this is nice with 427 because, you have this ability to really, see what you're going to get live in the editor, where before 426 we were very blind and couldn't see any of this. So this is all very nice. And so now that that's configured, I'm going to add in-camera VFX camera, and I'm going to connect that to the root. What that's going to do is now we're going to be able to set up nDisplay to have a camera frustum, to have a perspective overlapping our reflection viewport that is connected to a virtual camera in Unreal Engine. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to go to Place Actors, and I'm going to add a cinema camera. And I'm actually going to take that cinema camera and I'm going to parent it or child it, attach it to the nDisplay config. And what that's doing now is you can, if you have your camera, I'm going to bring this up a little here. Actually, I'll put that at like 130. I'll put it at 100 in height. And then now if we move around our stage, our whole config, you can see that the camera moves with it, because now this camera 0 point is the root of this nDisplay setup, this nDisplay config actor. So back in the nDisplay config, we're going to want to assign that camera that we just added. So you can drop down menu, and now you can see there's actually a little viewport there overlapping our existing viewport. And if we come back out here and you move your camera around, you can see the perspective change. And then now if we'd like to, from out here, we can control the view of the outside with the default viewpoint. But I'm going to leave this at 0, and I'm going to leave this at 100. So now we have the ability to, we can render this out, but I generally like at this point to add the positioning. So here's where you want to start. I'm going to introduce this now, and we're going to be talking about this almost through, all of these videos. You're going to want to assign a 0 point. You're going to want to assign the point at which your whole tracking originates. So if I was to take this and zero it out, and its 0 is now, it's 0 to 50. So I put that at 0, and see, that is at the base of this actor. That is at the 0 point of this root. So that's where all of our measurements are going to be measured from. That's where our tracking is going to originate from. And we want to be aware of that physically and virtually. So behind me, I have a spot on the ground that I've determined is my 0 point. And then I have some little pieces of tape next to it to determine which way is forward, which way is left, and which way is right. And then, of course, you should hopefully know which way is up and down. And then that's going to be my measuring point. Once we get into the tracking, I'm going to be using the VP Toolkit plugin to put the tracker on the screen and assign its position, but not everybody's going to be doing that. Some tracking systems aren't going to allow that. So learning how to measure from your 0 point to wherever your mesh needs to be is extremely important. So I'm going to remeasure mine right now, and I'm going to enter it so that we can get a firm grasp on where to place this. So when you're doing this with an LED wall volume, I usually recommend to set a specific distance that your 0 point is from the wall. So you could make it 4 meters from the wall, which would be 400 centimeters. And then now what you do is you'd make a measurement, you'd walk back, you'd measure back 4 meters, and then you'd put down a mark. And then what I usually do with a laser, I'll measure first to the right side of the wall, make sure that that is the same distance as the left side of the wall. So you can tell if you're perfectly even and you're perfectly straight with the wall. For this, I am at 240 in X. So that means that my screen is 240 centimeters from my little dot on the ground in forward. And then if I take the forward axis of that marker and I offset it to the left, it's negative 100. So positive 100 would be to my right, and then negative 100 will be to my left. So now I'm sitting over here, and this is our camera view from my recording camera here. And then my 0 point would be right behind me, right here, right where this camera is. And that just gives you some grounding on setting up your screen and making sure that it's accurate with whatever you set this 0 point, because that's how your tracking is going to know where your screen is in virtual space. And you're going to be able to do any measurements off of that in physical space to represent it virtually. Now I got to measure height. Okay, so now the center of my screen back there is 135 centimeters in height. So now we're getting a little higher. I'm going to make our default viewpoint 130, so that's kind of sitting height. I generally think of 130 centimeters to be like the height of a tripod. So now what we're going to want to do is up here, you're going to see export. We're going to export this config as an nDisplay config. So then we'll be able to bring this into Switchboard, and Switchboard will be able to read this file and send out a command to open up nDisplay with this configuration. So it will automatically open up in your content folder. I definitely recommend to not put it in your content folder. So I'm just going to leave this as nDisplay config. And then now, I mean, you can see that we have a basic setup going here, and we have the preview going. So from there, let's fire up Switchboard and get this thing on the wall. So to fire up Switchboard, I mean, of course, you're going to have to make sure that your project has Switchboard enabled. If you're using the VP Toolkit plugin, the concept kit, it actually enables Switchboard when it gets put into a project along with the other plugins that you need here. So I'm going to go to Switchboard. This is an old Switchboard configuration. I'm going to do new configuration, and it should auto fill out everything for you. So your configuration path is just the project name, and then you have the actual project path, and then you have the engine path. So if you need to change any of this, you can change it here, or you can change it in the settings after the fact. So I'm going to create that. And one of the first things I'm going to do so that we don't get confused with any of this is I'm going to go into the settings. I'm going to go down to multi-user server, and I'm just going to unselect all of the clean history, auto launch, auto build, because when I first fire this up, me personally, I don't generally like it to get into multi-user, because if it fires up multi-user, it could be doing something different than what I have control over if you don't properly understand multi-user. So I'll be making the next video will be on using multi-user, so we'll get into that. But if you're following along the setup, we're just gonna disable that for now. So once we're back here, we're gonna want to add a device. So we're gonna add an nDisplay device, and then browse. And we are going to go to our project that we created. And we should see our nDisplay config there. Open that, hit OK. And then, so on your other machine, or if you're firing this on locally on your own machine, on the machine that you're running here, you can open up a Switchboard listener like this. You can do this on your other machine as well, or you can go into your other machine and go to Program Files, Epic Games, 427, Engine, Binaries, Win64. Scroll down a little bit, and then the Switchboard listener is right here. So if you want to make a shortcut to that, or you want to set it up so that it automatically opens on your server or your satellite machine, or even your master machine that you're working on, you can just double click it here and it will open up. But I don't actually need one. Okay, so once we have the listener running on the other machine, or this machine if you're running locally, we're going to hit this, which is going to connect the node to the listener, and then you should see you're going to get some information here. Now you're going to see the drivers of your GPU. You can see your CPU usage, your GPU usage, GPU temperature, and this can be really useful if you're using a multi-node server system and you kind of want to see what's going on for performance and things like that. So now to run this, you just have to hit this guy here, and it should fire up nDisplay, however we configured it. Okay. So now you fired up your first nDisplay. Just as a heads up, I may have cut it out, but that took probably maybe a minute and a half, and this is a very light level. So especially when you first run nDisplay on a new machine, you definitely want to make sure that you have the correct, you give it some time to fire up, especially the first time. So I do want to note something here. So I'm running this on my server, which a lot of people will be doing a satellite machine or multiple nodes, multiple machines. One is an editor. Usually I would recommend minimum setup. You can run one machine. It gets complicated, but the best way to run it is to have two machines, one that is controlling it and running an editor and then controlling it through multi-user, which we're going to get into, and then having another machine that is dedicated towards rendering nDisplay so that you don't have to split the performance between two open instances of Unreal Engine. So I have a server drive set up. I won't be able to show you how to do that in this video. There is other ways that you can do it. You can also use free file sync, which will actually just copy those files onto other drives across your network. So a couple things to add quickly. I'm back in our config blueprint and I'm selecting the viewport that we've just set up. And I just wanted to talk about if you want to do custom sizes, this here's where you can come in and adjust things after the fact. So one thing that you're going to be doing pretty often is putting this, you may want to initially have this on a secondary screen. So as of right now, if I was to render this onto the machine that I'm on, it would fire onto my primary screen, my first screen from left to right, because we're at 0, which is the top left of window space. So if we want to move this over so that we render it onto our second screen, what we want to do is we want to take the node, which is the instance of Unreal Engine, and we'll move it over the width of a screen. So say if this was window space and we had two 4K screens, this would be our first screen, and then now it should render onto our second screen. And making sure that this is accurate is definitely important, because once you get into LED wall processors and how they map things, you may actually be sending out a 4K signal to the screen, but then only rendering a section of it. So say if your LED wall processor is taking that 4K image in width and then you have a different pixel height, you can adjust that here. And you'll want to put that in here. So you're going to want to put this at whatever you are rendering to, and then more often than not, you can kind of make this just the whole output, the node. But I would usually recommend making it fairly exact so that you're not rendering a node in space that there is nothing happening. Thank you for watching, and if you've liked this video and would like to see more content, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.